Unit A, open the door!
It's DOC TV. We need to talk. Come on out with your hands up.
Police, get down!
Bitch, your phone ain't even on yet. You know what I mean? Bitch, you can't even call your mom.
What's up, everybody? I'm Blessed and Free. Welcome back to another episode of DOC TV. So you guys know this is a prison channel, but today is going to be a little bit different. If you're new and you're tuning in for the first time, on this channel I talk about prison, jail, crime, corruption, everything. But today's guy got a special guest on. This guy is a retired police officer. So we always see the side of the convict, but today we're going to get to see the side of what a police officer goes through in the line of duty.
Josh, thanks so much for letting us come in and speak with you. Hey, listen, there's nothing ever easy in life, and getting here was a little bit difficult. But I'm honored to sit down and talk with you, because if you're speaking to your audience from a prison perspective, we're from a law enforcement perspective, you have to understand that there's more that brings us together than separates us. And if we can sort of bridge that gap, maybe we can heal some of the other things that are going on. But my name is Kevin Donaldson. I am a retired police officer, father of two, and I now run the Suffering Podcast to teach people how to use their suffering, repurpose it, send it back out in the world for some purpose.
Well, you sound like a good dude, man. Just real quick, tell them again what your podcast is, which service, they can find you on that, so that way if they want to tap in with you, they can.
The Suffering Podcast can be found on all major podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all the other ones. Or you can just go to thesufferingpodcast.com. You'll find us on there.
All right, man. Well, I want everybody to get to know you a little bit. So what was your life like growing up before you became a police officer? And what were some of the things you went through that led you into the path to then becoming a police officer?
Well, the funny thing is there's no preparation for becoming a police officer. And there's a couple different people in this world. There's those that spend their whole lives trying to become police officers. And then there's people who see it as a job. And that was me. I saw it as a job. My pursuit was never police work. My pursuit was never getting into any type of law enforcement. I sort of fell backwards into it. But when I did find it, I found something that maybe I've been looking for my whole life. In Atlantic City, and especially when I grew up, it was ruled by the mob. You had Nicky Scarfo, who was the boss. I went to school with one of his children. I know all the other ones.
Which is a true gangster.
Oh, he was the mighty little guy.
Yeah.
And he was vicious. You crossed him. I didn't see those guys as gangsters. I saw those guys as fathers. I saw them. They were at little league games. Especially when you're little, but you knew they had some sort of respect to them, because kids are very good at picking that stuff up. You don't have to tell them, and that's something we lose as adults, or we lose most of it. But there's always that inner gut feeling where, wow, this is a guy, this is a serious guy. Not to say he's a good guy, but he's a serious guy. So we never looked at it that way, and it wasn't until I got a little older that you start to see, hey, so and so's father went away for 10 years, or this guy got found in a trunk. My good friend's father was the underboss of the Philly mob. And then he turned state's evidence against Nicky Scarfo. Next thing you know, I don't see my friend anymore. So this is the reality of that life. And although it's attractive in many, many ways, people tend to shy away from the grim finish below the glossy veneer.
Yeah, they don't play the tape forward.
You're really only looking at the good stuff. You're not looking at the bad stuff. I mean, there was a story I once heard that these guys, somebody owed them money. And next thing you know, the guy's in a shed in the backyard getting beat on for 3 days, and there's some other really, really bad things that happened to him. Nobody talks about that stuff. They only talk about, hey, what you see in a Bronx Tale, again, that's a true story, but that's the myth. That's the myth. Let me explain to you what that life does to you. So Nicky Scarfo, we'll take him as a prime example.
Okay.
I knew his son Mark, and I knew the other two sons that he had too. Mark, when Nicky got indicted in '88, his son Mark hung himself because all the media attention, he just didn't want to do it no more. The poor kid, and listen, the kid had his issues. You knew he had his issues. I mean, I remember kids in high school used to beat him up. Like, this is Nicky Scarfo's son, and you're beating him up.
Really?
What?
See.
Why? Why would you do
Yeah.
that? Why would you
Well,
even take that chance?
So the kid, what, he wouldn't fight back, or?
He had such a big mouth that, they just said they put him in his place. But whether you believe in the mafia or not, I'm not going to roll those dice.
Yeah, well, he kind of had it coming too. Big mouth guys
Yeah.
usually always get one good one.
But the funny thing is about it is he wasn't just a big mouth. He had some damage. That stuff affects you. You see
Yeah.
all that stuff growing up. And Mark his name was Mark Scarfo. Mark was old enough to know what his father was doing. He knew full well.
Yeah, if you know, he knew.
He knew. I played baseball against a guy named Vincent Falcone. His father was found in a trunk in Margate. His father was killed by Phil Leonetti, who was my friend. My friend was Phil Leonetti. His father was crazy
Damn,
Phil
bro.
Leonetti. But the funny thing is you want to know a little bit about the gangster lifestyle? Nicky Scarfo died in prison 2017. His son, Nicky Jr., is in prison right now. His older son got out of the life, and I know him. His name's Chris. And he's totally changed his life around, changed his last name, and believe it or not, my mother actually works for him. So
It's wild.
you can get out.
Yeah.
There are ways out.
Oh, there's always a way out, man. It's just I think it's in the family. It's already in the DNA. So I feel like when the younger kids grow up and get into it, you said, a product of your environment, and I think that's what happens with a lot of the young kids growing up in a mafia family.
But from there, I lived in a town called Absecon, just right next to Atlantic City. And the kids I hung around with, I became a product of my environment, just like you said. I started doing some crazy stuff. I was a thief. I really was. I was a thief. Anything
Like a
that wasn't nailed
klepto?
down. It started as a klepto. You go into the store and you steal some candy, and then as you got older, the craziest thing I ever did is I stole a hot tub out of a house. like a hot tub. What am I doing with a hot tub? Why would you steal it?
Already installed hot tub?
Yeah, it was a newly it was a new construction house, so you crack the pipes, like you just step on them, destroy this thing. You don't put any forethought into, this is somebody's house, somebody paid for this, and they're going to have to reimburse us. You don't think about stuff like that.
Bro, there was actually a group of kids that in Florida that were going around to neighborhoods still being developed, and they would go inside an almost finished house and destroy the whole house just for no fucking reason.
Again, they're not seeing the damage, the collateral damage, the after effects.
No way they are.
So I started going down that road, and the people I hung around with in high school, my good friends, they're doing prison terms, they're doing B&Es, they're doing gun charges, drug charges. So it was imperative that I get out of there. It was
Before
really,
you got wrapped up.
I would have been right there.
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind. But I had an opportunity, so I did play football, and I loved playing football, and I was pretty bright, I was intelligent enough to get accepted into college. I go to college, play football, and it's 2 hours away. So I'm out of my environment. And I'm like a fish out of water, but I'm real excited because I have a chance. And people always have a chance to change their stars. I had that chance, and I seized it. I became a completely different person. I didn't turn my back on what I was, but I knew that that's not who I wanted to end up being. So now, being 2 hours away in front of a different environment, I have this strange opportunity. I'm real into football. I love playing football. And the funny thing about football is you find a bond, even with the opposite team, because I was a lineman. We'd stand up against each other. I'd tell you stuff about your mother. I'd tell you what I did to your girlfriend last night. I'd spit on your hand. I'd throw up on you. And we'd go into them. You go into them. You get under their pads. You twist their nipple. Just anything to get them aggravated.
Yeah.
But I was half of a jerk too, because I'd go in there. I'd get under their pad. I'd twist their nipple and get them real nice and mad. And I'd walk past the ref. I say, hey, keep an eye on 68. He's getting a little dirty. And sure enough.
Shit, how you doing? I'm
Sure
dirty.
Sure enough, he'd come back at me with something, because I was a big fan of a football player named Conrad Dobler. He used to do the same thing.
Well, when you're in that football environment, being an athlete, especially in high school, you're developing a brotherhood within your teammates, and friends do shit like that to each other.
And the strange thing is that's who you start associating with.
You were associating with people like that with your sport and football. That was the product of your environment moment where it changed for you, because you used to be associating with mob kids, the crazy shit. So maybe moving away, from where you did was obviously a blessing in disguise.
It was truly a godsend.
Yeah.
Truly a godsend, because without that, I'm not sitting here today. Which let's put it this way, it's not that my life has been all sunshine and roses. I went to school, I got all these degrees, and I got out, and I wanted to be an English teacher so bad because there were some teachers in high school that really tried to put me on the right path. I'm thick-headed.
Yeah,
so
you know everything.
Yeah, I know. When you're 17 years old, you know everything.
Bro,
I got a 12-year-old right now. He knows everything. He knows everything. But then all of a sudden you become 17, you realize how stupid you were at 12, and then you become 25, you realize how stupid you were at 17.
That's crazy.
I'm 47 years old now. I got it though. I'm telling you, I got it. Yeah.
10 years later.
10 years later. This kid was really stupid.
Let me ask you this real quick, because a lot of my viewers suffer with addiction. Did you, during any of your life, or have any family members that suffered with like the disease of addiction?
I would come from a half Irish Protestant, half Irish Catholic.
Say less. All of that.
Yeah. The funny thing is because of my police life, and then one of the reasons I retired was PTS. I no longer call it PTSD because it's not a disorder; it's brain injury. So I had an uncle.
Never heard that put like that.
So it's
that
PTS.
Makes sense, bro.
I'm doing my part. I'm going to do my part in order to change the stigma of this. I had an uncle who fought in World War II, my grandfather's brother. He was prisoner of war in Germany for 27 months. His name was George. Everybody called him Duke because he was a shorter guy, loved to fight. But being prisoner of war in 27 months and some of the stuff that he saw, I mean, he had to eat a cat. I used to get these little stories out.
Hold on, what?
They didn't have any food. They would let him eat potato peels. So there was a cat roaming around the camp. They killed it. They skinned it. They ate it. Tomorrow could be the day because the day they die. So he gets out of the army, and everybody had always told me since I was a little kid, Duke's just a drunk. He never got married. Always had a horrible alcohol problem. Always fought. I mean, he
was
fought.
probably an asshole too.
He was funny. He's really funny when you. But what you realize now, looking back on it, is this guy suffered so bad from PTS, and there was no help. Hey, at least there's help today. At least there's awareness today. There's no awareness. If he showed anything that was sort of not right, people, he's just a drunk. That's all he is. But he wasn't. He was hurting. He was hurting inside.
He was self-medicating his PS.
PTS, yeah, PTS.
Yes.
He absolutely was. And I always feel for that because I remember after my incident, my father says, "Oh yeah, Duke was a drunk." I'm like, yeah, and I wasn't in the right frame of mind. I went after my father. I'm like, don't say that again. Don't ever say that again. I'm going to tell you why. Yeah. So after coming out of college, I started teaching high school because that's what I always wanted to do. I wanted to be that teacher that changed somebody's life.
Props to you for that, man. Because there's not a lot of teachers that I don't believe go into that career for that aspect.
And the sad part is I think there's a lot more that go into it with that idealistic mentality, but when they find out the reality and the constraints of the school system, it falls away real quick and they become very disheartened and disillusioned with the system. And that's what happened to me. I remember I woke up one morning and I looked in the mirror and I wasn't in football shape no more. I was unhealthy. I was smoking. I was overweight. And I said to myself, I looked 10 years older than what I was. I was about 22 years old. And I said, there's just no way I'm doing this for another 35 years. I'll be dead.
Yeah, the stress will kill you.
And then at that point, I just said, that's enough. I'm not doing this anymore. Handed in my resignation, finished out the school year, and went on to a couple different jobs. There was some filler jobs. I sold cars. I traveled coast to coast. But it was always a job. It was never a career. It was never a calling. Mm-hmm. You're always searching. And when you're young, it's easy to do that stuff. You don't have any responsibilities. You can move around. You can do whatever you want to do.
You can basically do it. Whatever you want.
And then one day I'm in the gym and a guy comes up to me. He goes, well, why don't you be a police officer? We're testing. And I said, you know what? I never really thought about it. And the way it was sold to me, hey, you got pension, you got benefits. And the town was Roseland, New Jersey, which is in northern New Jersey. It's a small, white, upper middle class neighborhood, very nice, crime's low, great place to live. Problem is, it's about 10 miles away from Newark, connected by a major artery. So anything somebody wanted to steal, they just came into Roseland because it was affluent. But it sounded like a great career. Take the test, I'm in. Take the psychological, I fooled them. Well, not really. No, I'm only kidding.
How hard is it at this point, though? What years are we talking?
This is 2001. I got hired on June 19th, 2001.
I mean, at that time, how hard was it really to become a police officer? Like, do you feel like the other police officers gave you proper training, or was the first day you got put on the job you were a little like, whoa, I'm kind of lost?
Well, you go through a police academy. So, but in New Jersey, being a police officer is the most competitive job market out of anything. It's very difficult because the pay's really good, benefits are really good, the pension's good, and you're working a job that they write movies about. Unfortunately, they're very unrealistic movies, but they're writing movies about
right?
it. So I go in the academy in August, and we're sitting in the academy, and then the world changes. Everything turns around, and first plane hits the World Trade Center, September 11th. Listen, it's not unheard of for a plane to hit one of those big buildings. It happens all the time. Small Cessnas run into them, and that's what we thought it was. I'm like, no big deal. Guy comes in and says, second plane just hit the second tower.
So you knew immediately, like, shit is about to get real.
You're like, what the fuck is going on here? You're like, this was going on. So then you hear about the Pentagon, and then you hear about Flight 93 that goes down in Pittsburgh. The world changed after that second plane hit the tower. Changed for everybody.
Yeah,
changed for us, especially in that area, because I was living in Parsippany, New Jersey, and I still live in Parsippany, New Jersey. We could see the buildings burning, so it was real. We're in the academy. I'm sitting right next to a girl whose father worked for Cantor Fitzgerald. One of the planes wiped out all of Cantor Fitzgerald. So
it hit their part of the building.
Hit their part of the building.
Damn.
I lost a good friend who worked for Cantor Fitzgerald, and we all from that area. The funny thing is, we all know at least one person that went down in the tower. Of the 3,000 people that died.
Yeah, there was a lot.
Our department recalls us, and I remember we were only a month into the academy. My department hands me a gun and says, "Hey, don't shoot anybody." That's what they do, because nobody understood what was going on.
Crazy.
We thought we were at war. Whether
we
I was
were at war, kinda though.
Yeah, but we thought, it's Pearl Harbor. They're coming to attack us. That's kind of what we thought. So I was given my gun as an academy recruit and went and stood post, because we had a couple hot spots in town that were terror targets. So I'm out there and I'm looking at this different job. What happened to the nice upper middle class? You take groceries in for old ladies. No, that's different now.
It wasn't like this in the brochure.
No, police world changed forever. But I got into this job for this life of service that I loved. Like I never wanted to go hunt down bad guys, and yeah, we did all that stuff too. But those aren't impactful to me. What was impactful to me was a kid that remembered me as Officer Kevin, and his name was Mason. It's a quick story.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was an emotionally disturbed woman. She was going to kill herself, and she had this son right next to her. Wouldn't let anybody near her son. He's about 3 or 4 years old, and his name was Mason. So she's got a knife, and she's ready to end her life. There's a rule in police work. You can't let anybody with a knife within 25 feet of you, because they can stab you. Whether you can't draw your gun fast enough and get them. They can come at you and get through. I kind of went against every piece of training I ever had, because this woman was really in need. So I sat with her. I sat down next to her, and I just talked to her. I talked to her like a human being. The other cops, they were a little bit more standoffish. Police work is all about using your language skills, your verbal judo, because it's just another tool in your toolbox. Right. And that's what I did with this woman. We were able to get her out of there, go get her help. So fast forward about 12 years later, now I'm sitting in a supermarket, I'm walking through one of the aisles, I'm in civilian clothes, I'm not in uniform, and I hear, Officer Kevin. He's like a 15, 16-year-old kid. I go, hey, how you doing? He goes, you Officer Kevin? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I'm Mason. And then it clicked in my head.
Dang, that's crazy.
It's Mason. It's this little kid. And he goes, you really helped my mom out that day. I never forgot that. 3, 4-year-old kid, that's a traumatic thing to see your mother almost trying to kill herself.
Yep.
But I walked out of that supermarket after a 10-minute conversation. How's your mom? Oh, she's better. You really helped her. She got some help. She got the help she needs. I walked out of that supermarket. Now I'm about 6'3". I walked out, I was 7 foot tall.
Yeah, you're feeling like Iron Man.
Like Cloud Nine. Yeah, you're the real superhero at that point. You're really impacting lives. Like, yeah, this is what I wanted to do. So I lost all these jobs I had in the past, and I found a calling, and I loved it.
What's crazy to me about it is that, you know, I've seen it from the other side, obviously being the convict and you're the police officer. And from what I've seen in corrections and, you know, people that have arrested me that are officers, they didn't get into the line of work for what you got into it. So I just wanted to say salute to that, because a lot of people, once they get some power, they abuse that power. And
Many of them do. There's some people who should never be police officers.
I
In
agree.
every profession, that's true. But, you know, when I arrested a real hard criminal, and we saw a lot of them, we really did. Sometimes there's always reasons why they went down that path. There are reasons.
Definitely.
The worst thing you can do to anybody who's committed a crime is dehumanize them. Because that what good does that do to dehumanize anybody?
it makes that person worse.
Right. It makes them
Literally,
less than
yeah.
human,
Right.
even in their own eyes. So if I'm going to humanize, you're a convict, right? Am I going to treat you any different because you were inside? Absolutely not.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely
that's long
not.
and gone.
You bleed the same blood as me.
Yeah.
So if I can treat you like a human and you're under a bad circumstance and you know I'm treating you fairly and like a human, still doing my job, being a police officer, but treating you like a human being, guess what? Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to get cooperation. I'm not going to have to be physical with you. I don't want to be physical with you. I can be, but why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
I want to be simple, stupid. I want my job to be
Keep it simple, stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid. The KISS method. It's one of the principles I live by. And anytime I ever arrested anybody for any crime, I see you and I raise you one. If you're nice to me, I'm going to be extra nice to you. If you're a jerk to me, I can be a real jerk.
Yeah.
I can be a real jerk.
And I'm sure being a police officer like you, I mean, I've been assholes to cops, and I know, you know, most people getting arrested are intoxicated, so the morals are out the way, and they really tell you how they truly feel. So I can only imagine the type of shit you've came across in your line of duty.
Oh God, there's some crazy stuff. You know, I was a big traffic guy because I love the math involved in it. It was just like a big giant puzzle to me. But one of the things with accident investigation in New Jersey, whenever they call out a team to come investigate the crash, it's a crime scene. So part of that crime scene and part of the evidence chain are the two people or the person or whoever was in there that was dead. So you have to follow them all the way to the autopsy. And I got to be honest with you. So everybody, it's gross. It is gross, but it's fascinating. Like, you're a workout guy.
So you're talking about a body coming in dead and they bring it into the morgue. You're now at the point where you're examining the dead body?
I am not actually physically touching them, but I have to.
Seeing it.
I'm seeing it. I have to stand there and bear witness because it's a chain of evidence. So whenever you take in any piece of evidence, whether it's a knife, gun, drugs, whatever it is, there's it'll be put in an evidence bag. You got to write on there. It's documented. It's detailed, because without that, there will never be a conviction. Because that's ultimately when you want to get the solid conviction. A body in a fatal motor vehicle crash is the same way. Officer has to be there to make sure the chain of custody integrity stays in place. But I'm going to tell you what, when you see human fat in the open air, it is the most fascinating thing you ever see in your life. But here's the downside. You're seeing this stuff, and people aren't supposed to see this stuff. So you start dealing with it in very unhealthy ways. And one of the ways police officers do it is just dark humor. And the first time
Everybody copes different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I saw my first autopsy was a 43-year-old male, and he was locked up like this. And the doctor comes in, he goes, I already know what he died of. I'm like, what do you mean I already know what he died of? You didn't even touch him. And he goes, he died of smallpox disease. Because you're laid out there naked as the day you were born. And that's why I say anybody you care about, try not to have an autopsy on him if you can avoid it.
What was the worst autopsy that you did, and how many did you do total?
Total. You know what? I didn't even count. They're faceless because they're research projects at that point. You have to separate yourself. You have to dehumanize them. Like we just talked about not dehumanizing people. That, in order for your mental stability, you have to dehumanize it and detach it. That used to be a real human being. It's no longer a human being.
Right.
This is strictly a science project. That's all.
How long did it take you seeing, each dead body come in from the beginning before you learned how to use that tactic to cope with, obviously, trauma? Because that's trauma.
Relatively quickly, because of the fascination I had for it. I mean, you see like a pituitary gland. It looks like a little molar tooth. And they pull that out there, or they pull the skin over there, and you're like, wow, that's what a human skull looks like, fresh. or they clip the rib cage, and you see all this stuff, and you, oh, okay, so they're hard. You know, a lot of times.
That's crazy. Man, I'm built like that. I mean, I could see some like, you know, crazy shit, but when you're talking about cutting open a human, you know, and then how you said it, I don't know. I probably could have adapted like that. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Until they get into the bowel tract. So,
Tell us about that. What is that all about?
They cut into the bowel tract, and that's the smell. The smell is real bad. That's where all the poop is. So, you know, on one fatal motor vehicle accident, we found through investigation some receipts. They just came back from Costco and they ate sausage and pepper sandwiches. Well, they pull the contents out of the stomach, and there is chewed sausage and peppers. I will never to this day touch sausage and peppers.
I bet not.
It's pretty gross. But you know, there's different ways you put mints in your mouth, and there's different little techniques to stuff on their nose.
Shit,
But if you just have to separate yourself. Because as police officers, you see all this different trauma. Like the average person, the average citizen will see 1, maybe 2 critical incidents in their entire life. A police officer in a 20-year career will see upwards of 800.
And I think that's why the police officers in a whole have the highest suicide rate, because of all the trauma they're exposed to.
Yeah, and you can only put, you know, you're given a glass when you're born, and every piece of damage that goes in there, the glass fills up a little bit more. And that's why young officers involved in critical incidents usually have a higher likelihood of staying on the job, because their glass, they haven't seen a whole lot. Mm-hmm. But over a career where you're seeing trauma after trauma, that glass spills over, and then it takes one incident. And
that explains my whole life, man. You bottle down everything, and then eventually you just explode.
Got to take a sip every once in a while, brother.
With you being a police officer, you were in the academy. First quarter, you see the trade centers go down. We're in war. How long was it into your police officer career that you actually were involved in something personally that affected you?
I was
dangerous, you know, crazy.
I was about 13 years in. It was July 10th, 2013. You know, they always start out at the slowest night possible. And as a police officer, it's either mind-numbing boredom interrupted by brief moments of horror. And that was said by Robert Barone from Everybody Loves Raymond. It was great definition of police work. This night was so slow. We were working 12-hour shifts. It was 10 o'clock at night on a Wednesday. I pull up next to my partner, and I say, geez, just anything in the world, alarm call, anything to get me out of my car. I pull out of there, and we used to have to do strip mall checks, and I go over to do this check. Over the radio, that crack of the radio, your adrenaline goes. It's an open 911 call. Unknown. All I can hear is arguing in the back.
You don't know what's going on.
No, you know, you always think that there's going to be that one call. It's going to be a real serious call. You never really believe it, but you prepare for it.
Right.
So, you know, when you don't know what's going on, you're going full bore. You know, we're doing 70 miles an hour. It's 10 o'clock at night, so there's nobody around. Lights, no sirens, because you don't want to tell them that you're coming. You don't want to let your presence be known. We get there in front of the residents, and you know, it was in those days, I didn't even take my cell phone with me. My cell phone always stayed in the bag. But you're on your way there, you're coming up with some sort of tactical plan with your partner. Like, okay, you do this, I do this.
Right.
Our plan was, I was going to stay at the front door. He was going to go around the back, because it was a townhouse complex, and it was in on both sides.
Okay.
So he's either going out the front or the back, or she. We again, we don't know. But I'm in front of a steel door with the blinds drawn, and we pound on the door. And all we hear is, don't come in here, don't come in here. My partner's around back.
What went through your head right when you heard that?
Nothing too serious.
Okay.
You know, it's like, of course they don't want us there. Nobody wants the police to show up.
Yeah, facts.
But our plan was, he was going to stay by the back door. I was going to try to breach the front door, which, by the way, the movies are totally bullshit on. You don't kick in the front door. You kick in a closet door, but you're not kicking in the front
Especially a steel front door.
So they give us something called Halligan bars. So a Halligan bar is like a fireman's crowbar.
Okay.
And there's breaching methods, especially for steel doors. So on a signal, I'm going to start breaching this door. Signal comes, I bang twice, I put the hook in the door, and I'm ready to breach it, and then I hear pop, 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 pop.